I walked into the small town's dive bar, trying to shake off the exhaustion from my road trip. The air inside was thick with smoke, the low hum of conversation mixed with the clink of bottles and glasses. It wasn't the kind of place I'd usually stop at, but I'd been on the road for hours, and this was the only place in sight. At the bar, a group of bikers sat, their leather jackets covered in patches and logos from all over the country. They were rowdy, loud, and definitely the last people I wanted to deal with after such a long ride. But I needed a drink, and I wasn't going to let a bunch of tough guys intimidate me. I ordered my whiskey and found a seat near the window. From the corner of my eye, I could feel their eyes on me. They were whispering, laughing under their breath, and occasionally glancing over, no doubt judging me for the fact I was alone, small, and not one of them. A burly man with a thick beard leaned over to the bartender, his voice booming. "You sure she belongs here, man? Looks like she'll snap in half if someone bumps into her." They all laughed. I kept my head low, trying to ignore them, but I could hear the snickers. It was clear what they thought of me, a woman who didn't look like she belonged among their rowdy, muscle-bound ranks. They saw me as weak, maybe even naive. They assumed I couldn't handle the rough nature of this place, the tough crowd, or the life that came with it. But they had no idea. As the night went on, the group of bikers got louder. Their banter grew more vulgar, and I could feel their eyes burning into me. One of them, a tall guy with a long, braided beard, swaggered over to where I sat, leaning against the table with a smirk on his face. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said with a teasing tone, clearly enjoying the opportunity to mock me. "You lost? You sure don't look like you belong in a place like this." I didn't respond, just took a slow sip of my drink. It was clear they expected me to flinch or look intimidated. But I wasn't the type to let anyone get under my skin. I'd had my fair share of tough moments, and if they wanted to mess with me, they'd quickly realize they were messing with the wrong person. He leaned in closer, his breath thick with alcohol. "What, you think you can hang with us? Maybe you should stick to the quiet coffee shops and leave the rough places to people who actually know how to handle themselves." I looked him dead in the eyes, a smile playing at the corners of my lips. "You have no idea who you're talking to." At that, the group's laughter died down. The smug expression started to fade, replaced by confused curiosity. The man in front of me raised an eyebrow, as if wondering if I was joking. I wasn't. I could feel the tension in the air, the moment hanging there between us like a live wire. I wasn't weak. Far from it. The biker's smirk faltered for just a second, but he quickly recovered. "All right, tough talker. Let's see how tough you really are," he challenged, clearly trying to keep the situation in his control. He gave me a push, but I didn't budge. The other bikers watched in silence now, their grins slipping into expressions of curiosity and skepticism. They were waiting for the moment when I'd either crumble or stand up. The tension in the room thickened, the whole bar seemingly holding its breath. I set my glass down, slowly and deliberately, and stood up. My boots made a quiet thud against the wooden floor, and I straightened my jacket, the motion purposeful. I was much smaller than the men around me, but that didn't matter. I wasn't here to play their games, to prove anything. "I'm not here to fight with you," I said, my voice steady, calm, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "But if you want to keep underestimating me, feel free. Just know that there's more to me than meets the eye." The crowd remained silent. The biker in front of me seemed to reconsider his approach, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. His bravado had faltered, and I could see the realization start to set in. Then, I did something that left them speechless. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small, silver box. The men exchanged glances, unsure of what was coming next. I opened the box with a soft click and revealed the object inside, a medal, worn but gleaming under the dim lights. "I don't think you realize," I said quietly, as their eyes flicked between me and the medal, "but I've been through things you can't even imagine. So before you judge me, you might want to think twice." The room fell into an eerie stillness. The biker who had mocked me earlier opened his mouth but couldn't find words. The medal wasn't just any trinket. It was a military decoration, one that didn't come easy. I'd earned it in ways they couldn't fathom. The silence in the bar was palpable, almost suffocating. For a moment, no one moved. The bikers seemed to have forgotten their taunts, their arrogance replaced by something else, respect, perhaps fear. It wasn't often that someone like me showed up and reminded them of their place. The man who had first approached me stepped back, his eyes no longer mocking, but genuinely uncertain. The others watched him, waiting for him to react, but instead, he simply stood there, taking a long, slow breath. "Well, hell," he muttered under his breath. "Guess we don't know who we're messing with." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I wasn't here for praise or recognition, just for some peace. I slid the medal back into its box and placed it carefully on the table, making sure they saw the weight of it. It wasn't about the medal, really, it was about what it represented, the trials I'd faced, the things I'd overcome. It was about showing them that I wasn't just a woman they could push around. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the other bikers, a big guy with a scar running down his face, stood up. He wasn't laughing anymore. In fact, his tone was almost respectful. "You're something else, lady. We didn't know." I nodded, folding my arms across my chest. No one ever does. And that's always the mistake. The tension in the bar began to lift, the oppressive air slowly replaced by murmurs of approval from the rest of the bikers. They had seen something they hadn't expected. A woman who wasn't afraid to stand her ground. A woman who had a secret they couldn't have guessed in 100 years. The man who had mocked me earlier cleared his throat, his voice no longer cocky. "You're all right, lady. Damn, you're all right." The others chimed in, muttering their agreement. The respect was undeniable now, and the power had shifted. I finished my drink and stood, grabbing my jacket. "Glad we got that sorted," I said coolly, turning toward the door. "Maybe next time, you'll think twice before judging a book by its cover." I stepped outside into the cool night air, the door of the bar swinging shut behind me. The sound of the bikers' conversation faded as I walked away, but I could feel their gazes lingering, perhaps in awe, perhaps in disbelief. Either way, I didn't care. I had nothing to prove to them, and that was the power I'd taken back tonight. The engine of my bike hummed softly in the quiet of the night as I slid into my seat. I could hear the soft rustling of the wind through the trees, the kind of stillness you can only find when you're truly alone. But it wasn't a lonely feeling. It was freeing, knowing that the world was full of people who would always judge you, underestimate you, or mock you, until you showed them who you really were. I kicked the engine to life, and as I pulled out of the lot, I couldn't help but smile. It was a small victory, but it was mine. And the next time someone tried to mess with me, I knew I'd be ready. No more secrets. Just the real me, strong, capable, and unwilling to let anyone define who I was. As I drove off into the night, the taunts of the bikers still echoed in my mind, but now, they sounded distant, almost laughable. And in their place was the hum of my bike, my own sense of power, and the road stretching out before me. That was all I needed. The road ahead stretched endlessly, but my mind kept circling back to the bar, the bikers, the respect I'd earned. It felt like a victory, sure, but something in me knew that wasn't the end of it. I wasn't naive enough to think they wouldn't remember me, or that they'd just forget about the woman who had stood up to them. The truth was, I hadn't just earned their respect, I'd set something in motion, something they might not fully understand just yet. As I sped down the empty highway, the sound of my bike echoed in the night, but so did something else, the quiet whisper of what was to come. The next day, I pulled into a small town I hadn't planned on visiting, just passing through, really. But as I parked my bike near a gas station, I spotted a familiar face, the tall biker with the braided beard. He was leaning against a nearby truck, his arms crossed, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He nodded as I approached, giving me a subtle smile. Guess we meet again, huh? I didn't say anything at first, just gave him a nod in return. Something in his posture was different this time. Less aggressive. Almost respectful. You heading out again? He asked, his voice a little softer than I remembered. I am, I replied, grabbing my helmet from the seat. Just passing through. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the road behind me. You know, I told the guys back at the bar, don't mess with her. That woman's been through things we'll never get near. I looked at him, surprised by his words. He wasn't mocking me. He wasn't even questioning me. Instead, he was warning others. A shift. Good to know, I said, tightening the strap on my helmet. Before I revved the engine, he gave me one last look. You're all right. Whatever's in your past, it's clear it's made you strong. Stay that way. The words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just respect anymore. It was acknowledgement, something deeper. And for a moment, I felt the weight of my journey settle in, both on the road and in life. I had walked through the fire and come out on the other side, not unscathed, but stronger for it. I waved goodbye and kicked the bike into gear, leaving the small town behind. As I hit the highway again, I couldn't help but think, sometimes the hardest battles aren't won by fists, but by the strength to stand tall when everyone else expects you to fall. And that was the secret that no one could mock or take away. The road felt different now. Every mile I covered was lighter, freer. Maybe it was the way the wind hit my face, or maybe it was the fact that for the first time in a while, I felt like I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. But deep down, I knew there was more to it than just that moment at the bar, more to this feeling than the respect I'd earned from a few tough bikers. It was about reclaiming my own strength, my own power. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the empty highway. I was headed into a place I hadn't planned to visit, a quiet little town where the only noise was the occasional chirp of crickets and the hum of distant engines. It was a place where you could find peace, or so I thought. But as I pulled into the gas station, I noticed something strange. The same group of bikers from the bar, my adversaries, were there, gathered in a circle by the pumps. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't let my expression falter. They hadn't followed me here, it wasn't like that. I wasn't someone to be hunted. Still, their presence made me uneasy. The tall man with the braided beard caught my eye first. He stood tall, arms crossed, but instead of his usual cocky attitude, there was something almost protective about him. He nodded toward me as I walked past, and I gave him a brief nod in return. But it wasn't just him. As I continued walking, I could feel the eyes of the others on me. They weren't mocking anymore. They weren't laughing. The air was thick with a quiet kind of respect. I stopped near the payphone, pretending to check the time, when the sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. I turned, and there was the biker who had been the loudest in the bar, the one who had pushed me. This time, though, he wasn't sneering or challenging me. Instead, he offered a small smile, almost apologetic. "You're still riding?" he asked, his voice low, softer than I remembered. I nodded, keeping my distance. "I'm always riding." He looked at the others, then back at me. "We've been talking. Some of us, we were wrong. You're not just some woman who doesn't belong here. You've got something in you, something none of us expected." I didn't know what to say at first, so I just stood there, watching him. It was a strange feeling to hear such words from someone who had once looked at me with nothing but contempt. But there was no mistaking it, this time, his tone wasn't filled with mockery. It was genuine. "We figured it out. We've seen people come and go. But you," he said, stepping closer, his voice even lower now. "You're different. You've earned more than just a place at the table. You've earned respect." The weight of his words settled in, and for the first time since I'd walked into that bar, I realized something important: I didn't need to prove anything to them. Not anymore. I let out a breath and offered a simple response. It's not about earning respect. It's about being who you are. No matter what anyone thinks. He smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't a mockery. It was an understanding. A recognition of the truth. I could feel the eyes of the bikers still on me, but now, it was different. There was no tension in the air, no underlying threat. Just a quiet acceptance of what had transpired, what I had made clear. The town, the road, and the group of bikers had all shifted in some way, and it wasn't just because of me. It was because everyone there had seen a little of themselves in what I had done. They had all underestimated me, and in doing so, had underestimated themselves. The man with the braided beard stepped forward, and the others followed suit, each one with a subtle nod of acknowledgement. You know, he said, his voice calm and thoughtful now, it's rare when someone comes through and shakes things up like you did. Most people come, do their time, and leave. But you, he trailed off, as if searching for the right words. I didn't need him to finish. I already knew. I had come, I had stood my ground, and I had left my mark. With a quick motion, I swung my leg over the bike, preparing to ride out again. There was no need to linger any longer. But before I started the engine, I turned back to face them. You're right. I'm different. And you should remember that the next time you think you can judge someone based on what you see on the outside. I revved the engine, the familiar roar filling the night, and without another word, I took off down the road. As I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw them still standing there, watching me go, no longer with judgment in their eyes but with something else, something I hadn't expected, admiration. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about them. It was about me, about proving to myself that I could walk into any room, face any challenge, and hold my own. I wasn't just another person passing through. I was someone who had earned her place, not because of anything they could give me, but because I had the strength to take it. And as the road stretched out before me, I smiled. Because I knew that wherever I went, whatever I faced, no one would ever be able to mock me again. Not ever. The road blurred beneath me as I rode into the night, the steady hum of my bike the only sound in the air. It was the kind of peace you can only find when you know you've left something behind that can't be taken from you. The town, the bikers, the moments of tension and revelation, those were in the past now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was at play. I passed mile markers, watching them tick by, but my mind kept replaying the scene at the gas station. That biker with the braided beard, his words, the sudden shift in how they all looked at me. It wasn't just a change in respect. There was something more, something unspoken. As I rode further, I started to feel it, an unsettling sensation creeping up my spine. It was like the calm before a storm. The town had faded behind me, but somehow, I wasn't as alone as I thought. The quiet hum of the night seemed almost too still. Suddenly, a flash of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just another vehicle, but the way the lights grew closer and closer, too fast, too aggressive, told me something wasn't right. I accelerated, trying to outrun whatever was chasing me, but the bike behind me kept pace. It was a rumbling, powerful engine, one that seemed familiar, and it made the hairs on my neck stand up. I wasn't just being followed, I was being hunted. I leaned into the turns, pushing the bike harder, but no matter what I did, the vehicle behind me stayed right there, inching closer with each passing mile. Then, the headlights flashed once, almost as if to signal something. I glanced in the rearview mirror again, and I saw it, the same bikers from the bar. They were trailing me now, their bikes roaring in the night, a pack that had followed me, maybe not out of spite this time, but something else, something deeper. For the first time in a long while, I realized I wasn't in control anymore. The roles had shifted again. The bikers had come after me, not to mock, not to challenge, but because they understood something I hadn't quite gotten yet. They wanted to know if I was strong enough to face this, to face them. But now, I wasn't just riding to prove something to them. I was riding to prove it to myself. The wind whipped through my hair, and in that moment, I understood, the road would never stop testing me. But it was mine to conquer, no matter who chased me, no matter what battles lay ahead. And so, I let go of the brakes and pushed harder. I wasn't running anymore. I was riding forward, into whatever came next.